Good morning, everybody. I'm Sean Cecil, and today I'm going to share with you my greatest failure and how you can learn from my mistakes. So, I've been in this business. I've been doing what I do for a long time, right? And I've had some heart-wrenching failures over the past couple of years. And I want you to be able to take those lessons because I took some lessons from them, and I want you to be able to do so as well. But before those stories are going to make any sense, right? Because I'm going to share a couple stories with you for some examples of those failures, but they're not going to make any sense unless we go over something first, right? And the thing that we have to go over first is we've got to talk about how I know whether someone's career is healthy or unhealthy. So you should go ask yourself 3 questions, right? So the first question is, does the career that you're in make you happy? Are you happy with what you do? Very simple, right? We get indoctrinated as a society to believe that work is not supposed to be enjoyable, right? That your career is supposed to suck. Like that's just what we're taught. But that's total crap. So, there's data on this. You can go look at the Gallup numbers and you can see that according to the most recent polls, 15% of people actually really love what they do, right? So you don't have to have a crappy job. You don't have to do something you hate, right? There are 15% of people who are happy. Right now, 85% of people are either, not happy or really not happy, like actively hating their job, right? But there's no reason that you can't be in that top 15%. So a lot of people, they think, there's this elite group of the 1% who are super rich and the 99% is everybody else. That's not the right way to look at it. The right way to look at it is that there's 15% of people who are actually enjoying what they do and living a life that they consider great. And then there are 85% of people who aren't. And it's a lot easier to get into the 15% than it is to get into the so-called 1%, though I've helped a lot of people get into the 1%. That's neither, the point is you should be shooting for at least to be in that 15% who really enjoy their jobs. And if you can't say that you do, well, then you have to answer no to that first question, right? Now, the second question is, does the career that you're currently in allow you to meet your financial goals? Right. And when I say your financial goals, this should not be just scraping by and paying your bills. Right. That is not a good financial goal. You need to be more ambitious than that. You need to be able to be comfortable. You need to be able to enjoy your hobbies and your passions. Right. You need to be able to travel if you want to go travel. Right. You need to be able to, to not worry about money. Right. Those are financial goals that are meaningful. Right. Now, finally, the third question you got to ask yourself is my current career sustainable? Right now, if you are an employee, right, you're working for somebody else, your career is sustainable if you're on promotion track. If you are a freelancer or an entrepreneur, your career is sustainable if you are profitable and if you have a pipeline. And when I say a pipeline, what I mean is that you have a constant set of leads. You have the ability to reliably get leads that convert and new business, and you can reliably generate the revenue, and you're not depending upon a bunch of clients that you've had for a while that if they leave, you're screwed, right? So that's what sustainability means. And then the third aspect of sustainability is, is what you're doing having an effect on another aspect of your life? So for example, when I used to work at BCG, there was a guy and the problem was, everything was going great. He was happy, he was making money. And then he had a daughter, right? Because he wanted to have kids. And suddenly the BCG lifestyle was no longer sustainable for him, right? So is what you're doing sustainable with your lifestyle goals and the way you want to live? So those are the 3 questions, right? And the questions are, 1, does your career make you happy? 2, does it allow you to meet your financial goals? And 3, is it sustainable? Now, if you compromise on any one of those 3 things, then you've got a problem. Because if your career isn't making you happy, then you're risking, that first you're going to burn out, right? And then one of 2 things is going to happen. You're either going to quit because you can't take it anymore, or you're going to get fired because, no boss, no company wants to have employees who aren't happy, right? So, generally one of those 2 is going to happen. And if it doesn't, well, then you're just going to be miserable, which sucks, right? So if you're not able to meet your financial goals, so if you answer no to the second question, right, now, you've got financial instability, you can't pay your bills. If an unexpected expense comes up, you're just screwed, right? Like that's not a healthy situation either. And then 3 is, so if everything's good, but it's not sustainable, then you risk being stranded with no plan when things dry up. If your clients leave, or, if you're not on promotion track and then you get fired, or if something else happens in your life, then suddenly you have no clue what to do. You have no plan, you're stuck. And then you get into this position where you're always living in fear of those things because you wouldn't have a plan and you'd be screwed, right? So those three questions are really important, right? And settling for having a no to any one of those three questions is not an option, right? It's completely unaffordable. People think that it's okay if they say no to one of those three questions. They're like, oh, I'll tough it out. But it doesn't work that way, right? Because if you're burned out, that spreads to other areas of your life, right? I've seen people, and this is the kind of stuff I'm about to talk about, right? Divorce, addiction, not being able to make money in their business and, trying to do what their dream is, right? Not being able to live a life that's happy. And the cost of that is just astronomical, right? So a divorce, for example, the average divorce in this country costs $15,000, right? And that's just the financial cost. That's before you get into the lifelong trauma and all the lifetime cost of it, right? If you end up addicted, right? And I've talked to a lot of people who have turned to alcohol, to drugs, to other things to kind of try to ease their pain because they're burned out. That's about $20,000 for treatment, plus far more in spending on buying the actual things you're addicted to. And most importantly, all the lost opportunities because you couldn't show up at your best, right? If you don't know what you're doing and you don't know how to make money in your business as a freelancer, if you're trying to carve your own path and you have no clue, well, then you're probably paying about $50,000 to $100,000 per year, every year, to the university of not knowing what the hell you're doing, right? And that's a pretty expensive tuition, though. And then finally, if you end up trapped in some situation where you're burnt out for the rest of your life and you waste 20, 30, 40 years, I mean, that's priceless. You can't even put a value on that, right? So if you didn't answer yes to all three of those questions, does your career make you happy? Does it allow you to meet your financial goals? And is it sustainable? Then you are risking all of those things that I just talked about. Divorce, addiction, not making what you're worth, being miserable. Those are all things that are on the table, right? And now that you guys understand that, now we get to the story that I promised you, right? We're actually a set of stories. So every time I talk to someone about working with me to break out of the rat race and to live their dream and do what they want to do, I go and I get clarity on those three questions. I figure out what's going on, right? And then I use that to determine if their career has the equivalent of a chronic disease. And if it does, I make sure that I can help them. And only if they really need me and I'm absolutely sure that I can help do I ever extend them an invite to work with me, right? Because I want it to make sense. So just last month, I followed up with a bunch of people who had received offers to work with me and they chose not to do so. They said no for whatever reason, right? And guys, it was absolutely heartbreaking. So I talked to a guy whose wife had divorced him, and I think of the two people whose marriages I had helped to save, right? I talked to a man whose doctors are telling him that the stress of his job will kill him. Literally, that's what his doctors told him, that it would kill him. But his family's finances have deteriorated, so he feels even more scared to make the change that he needs. And then I think of all the people who've worked with me who have been able to escape their burnout jobs and even get huge raises. Right? I talked to a woman who is emotionally broken and is desperately praying for some guy to come find her and marry her because she sees that as the only way out, right? And I think of all my students who have managed to overcome their trauma, to start demanding more from life and actually succeeded in getting it. I talked to two guys who had been fired, right? And I think of all the people who I've worked with who were able to quit their jobs, not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to, right? And stories like those 5 people, that's what I consider my greatest failures, guys. Those are lives that I could have changed, right? And that is easily the hardest part of what I do, right? These are people who needed my help, but their fear overcame my truth, and that's on me. That I have to bear some responsibility for that. It's the hardest part of what I do, and it's what drives me to be a stronger person and a better communicator every damn day. Right? It's why I'm so passionate when I speak to people about making these shifts, right? Because I don't want you guys to, be in that position. And then even if you do dodge those bullets, right, then spend the rest of your life miserable in exchange for a couple years of retirement, right? Like human beings, we shouldn't have to suffer for most of our lives just to buy some peace at the end. That's not the way this is supposed to work. We shouldn't have to settle for partial lives when we can have whole ones. So that's the thing, guys. I want to let you know that you shouldn't settle, right? I wanted to pass on. I've had to bear that suffering, right, of watching this happen to people who I came to care about. And so I want you guys to learn from that, I want you guys to learn that it's not okay to settle. It's not affordable to settle, right? And, I want to also give you a little heads up that there's another way that you settle that you may not even realize is sometimes you'll realize that this is unaffordable, but your brain will trick you because what it will say is it will say, yeah, I need a change, but we'll do it someday. We won't do it now, right? So people will settle for this doing it someday and they'll kick the can down the road enough. And then eventually those some days add up to 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and eventually never, right? And then something happens and, I got to deal with that. So I want to give you guys a clear cutoff, right? If you answer no to any of the 3 questions at the beginning of this video, right, then you should have a detailed plan to be out of that situation within 6 months, right? Any more than that, and the risk of staying stuck for good increases exponentially, right? If you've got a plan that's going to get you out in 6 months, great. Right? If the plan's going to take longer than that, then you're definitely at the risk of getting trapped. And if you don't have that plan, if you don't have a plan to get out within 6 months, then you cannot afford to wait another day to put it together, right? So don't get those 2 timelines confused. I just gave you guys 2 timelines, right? So the first timeline is the plan, right? And the 6 months is the length of the plan. But the urgency, if you don't have a plan, is today. Like you need to get that figured out now, right? For exactly the reasons I just talked about, right? Imagine that you get to travel 20, 30, 40 years into the future and meet the version of you who spends the rest of their career stuck where you are right now, okay? If you're anything like the hundreds of people I've spoken to, that version of you is going to be filled with regret. Now imagine the version of you who gets this fixed now and spends those decades doing something that makes you happy. After seeing both of those futures, what action are you going to start taking now, right? Every day you are moving closer to one of those 2 futures, right? Regret or fulfillment. Which one are you going to choose, right? So I recognize most people, this has not been an easy talk for you or for me, but it's something that, everybody's got to hear, right? And the truth is that most people, they don't want to acknowledge the reality because, they don't want to acknowledge that they're settling for something that's completely unaffordable and that has a huge risk attached to it because it means coming face to face with this huge major obstacle that's standing in the way. And that obstacle is the fear of change, right? Now, if you're paralyzed by fear, the good news is that I'm going to show you how to break free and make the choices that are best for you and your family. And that's in the next video that you guys are going to watch. So guys, comment below with what you learned today and I will see you all in the next video. Wishing you the best. Cheers.